I'd like to reconvene the meeting of the City Council Public Finance Authority. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kelmick.
Here.
Councilmember Mosier.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vandermark.
Here.
Mayor Strickland.
Here.
Councilmember McKeon.
Here.
Councilmember Bolton.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Members, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's going to be led by Councilwoman Bolton, but I want to everybody to make sure you say happy birthday to the Councilwoman. Please, everybody give her a round of applause. It was her birthday. So she'll lead us in the pledge.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So invocation today will be led by Huntington Beach Police and Fire Chaplain Roger Wing.
Would you please bow with me as we begin this evening's meeting? Heavenly Father, you tell us in your word, for the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. And as we begin tonight's City Council meeting, we want to tap into that wisdom and knowledge that you so graciously and willingly provide to us. We pray for each of our City Council members as they deal with the very many difficult issues of our city and those that are on the agenda this evening. May you impart your wisdom and discernment to each member of the council. We pray for peace, unity, and harmony, and ask that you would give each one of them guidance to be able to make the best decisions to move our city forward. May your love and grace overcome any of the differences of views. Lord, we pray for all those who will be providing their input and sharing their comments at the podium this evening. Help them and guide them to share clearly, calmly, and concisely, and with the utmost dignity and respect. We thank you for bringing them here this evening to assure that our council has the benefit of the community's views and thoughts. We ask your blessing, Lord, on each of our council members, our city attorney, city treasurer, city clerk, police and fire chiefs, department heads, and all of our faithful and committed city employees who work so diligently in support of our city and our city council. We pray for health and safety for them personally and for their families. We also pray for all of our Huntington Beach first responders. May you keep them safe and give them your wisdom on every call. We thank you for the safe Memorial Day we had as it ushers in the beginning of a new summer season for our resort city. We ask your blessing on the thousands of visitors who will be enjoying all the beauty and festivities that Huntington Beach offers. We pray that Huntington Beach will have a safe, enjoyable, and prosperous summer season, and that everyone who enters our city will experience an encouraging, relaxed, and enjoyable time that presents our city as the great, safe, peaceful, and enjoyable community that it is, and encourages them to return. So bless our meeting this evening, and may your peace and wisdom guide all that occurs tonight, we pray. And we ask this in your name, Lord. Amen.
Members, going down to the agenda. City Attorney, do we have anything to report?
Yeah, one item briefly, Mayor. City Council voted unanimously 7-0 to authorize my office to file an appeal with the California Supreme Court in the Kennedy Commission versus City of Huntington Beach case. That's the one that was filed in 2015 with regard to the Court of Appeal decision with regard to the attorney's fees. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. City Clerk, do we have any supplemental communications?
Yes, we do, Mayor. I'll run through them real quick. We received a PowerPoint for City Manager item number 12, Huntington Beach Quality of Life Survey. Also an email communication for that item as well. On consent calendar for item 16, I put forth a memo with a small correction to the May 16 minutes. An email for item 17 regarding SWAT deployment of military equipment for the air show. And for consent item 22, a PowerPoint for the Infrastructure Advisory Fund report of fiscal year 21-22. For administrative item, item number 25, an email communication regarding the proposed MOU for the HBPOA. For council member items number 26, 2 email communications regarding the Charter Review Ad Hoc Committee. For item 27, regarding the Beach-Edinger Corridor Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report, we received, I believe it was 4 email communications, and that's it.
Thank you. Members, we'll go to item number 10. I just want to make an announcement that I recognize May 23rd is Sammy Hagar Day, acknowledging that the rock star did a heavy investment in Huntington Beach. He created the Cabo Wabo Beach Club that's modeled after the Cabo Wabo Cantina in Cabo San Lucas. And it's at the Waterfront Beach Resort. It's going to be a jewel for Huntington Beach. In fact, Mr. Hagar and his family have agreed to not only donate directly to Children's Hospital, but every dollar that's made at the Cabo Wabo Beach Club is going to be donated to charity. So I just want to acknowledge Sammy Hagar Day and thank you to the Hagar family for investing in Huntington Beach and doing that for our wonderful community. Thank you. City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
We have 12 signed up to speak, so I'm going to call the entire group. If you could just come down and approach both podiums. Amory Hansen, Andrew Einhorn, Ann Dunsmore, Ken Inouye, Kathy Ryder, Brenda Glim, Russell Neal, Tim Geddes, Mike Ali, Ann Dansborough, Pat Goodman, Adam Wood.
Thank you. Before we speak, I have to make this announcement. At this time, the City Council will receive comments from members of the public regarding any topic, including items on the open session agenda. Individuals wishing to provide a comment may do so in person by filling out the request to speak form delivered to the City Clerk. All speakers are encouraged but not required to identify themselves by name. Each speaker may have up to 3 minutes unless the volume of speakers warrants reducing the time allowance. Please note that the Brown Act does not allow us discussion or action on any topics not on the agenda. Members of the public who would like to speak directly with a council member on any item not on the agenda may consider scheduling an appointment by contacting the city administrative assistant at 714-536-5553 or emailing the entire city council at city.council@surfcity-hb.org. Thank you so much for being here. Mr. Ali, do you want to start? So, Mr. Ali, do you want to start, or Mr. Ali? Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff. Most of you know me. My name is Mike Ali. I'm a U.S. Army Vietnam vet. And we are doing an event this Sunday, and we'd like to invite members of the council, the community, the staff to come and join our event. I'll let Ann speak about the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ann Dunsmore. I'm the founder of Angel Force USA, and Angel Force USA sole mission is to raise awareness about veteran suicide. It is the leading cause of death in the military and the second leading cause of death of United States citizens. To this end, the way we've chosen to reach out and raise awareness is through entertaining, engaging, and then educating. We have put together a marvelous group of people in the entertainment industry, largely in music. They represent and have toured with bands that include The Who, The Rolling Stones, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Bob Dylan, Roger Daltrey, and a lot of people like that. And some of these people will be playing at this concert that will follow a pinning ceremony of Vietnam veterans on this 50th anniversary period of time for Vietnam-era veterans. That will begin at 11. The concert will begin at 12 and go until 5. I just want to raise a few issues that you may or may not already know, but 30,000 veterans have died by suicide, and that is the politically correct way to refer to it. It is not commit suicide, it is die by suicide. 30,000 have died by suicide since 9/11, compared to 7,000 in combat. 135 people are impacted by one suicide. It is largely understood that at a minimum, 22 veterans die by suicide an hour, but recent studies have shown that that number could be as high as 45 an hour. So while you are having your council meeting this evening, 2 people will have died by suicide in the United States. So with that, on a happy note, I think it's important for everybody to come, hug a vet, hear a little more. We're not going to drown everybody in this information, but we want people to know that it is a priority. It is the leading cause of death of veterans. And if there's a military organization that doesn't focus on that, I don't know who they are. So I want to thank Mike Ali for being our host at Zach's. I encourage all of you to come down. We are still taking sponsors, and I want to thank the city very much for having us here. You have the highest concentration of veterans in Southern California, and California has goes back and forth with Texas on having the highest number of veterans.
If you have any question, we'll answer it for you.
I don't think we are allowed just based by the rule, but I will tell you, you know that I'm there, and I encourage everybody to come. It's a worthy organization, a worthy, very worthy cause, and thank you so much for taking time in your busy day to be here and announce it to our community. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to say those challenge coins, by the way, they're referred to as challenge coins. They've got the band logo on one side and ours on the other, and it stops suicidence. And that's the word we use, the avoidance of discussion about suicide. So stop suicidence. Thank you for letting us be here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mr. Amory Hanson. I'm speaking tonight in support of item 27, Councilman McKeon's item to decertify the Beach Boulevard and Edinger Avenue Corridor Environmental Impact Report. Since 2014, a number of housing developments have been approved near the Bellaterra Mall. Yet another will be built at the site of the Burlington Coat Factory. It is time to reevaluate if any further development is needed in this neighborhood and what environmental impact such development will have on Huntington Beach. Developments in malls and shopping centers have, with good reason, become a recently popular trend in the housing market. Sadly, not everyone can live near a mall. Otherwise, who would not want to move a great mall near them? I was born in Washington, and I would love to have Gallery Place by my door, but it's not there. Viewers of The Crown will be familiar with the great Harrods in London. I would love to have Harrods by my door, but it's not there. The Great Mall of America in Minneapolis, it's not there. The Galleria in Houston, it's not there. Disney Springs and Lake Buena Vista, it's not there. If someone wants to buy something at Bellaterra and they can't find it elsewhere, they will make the effort to travel here as they always have. And that should be promoted and encouraged to increase revenue in Huntington Beach. But in terms of residency, and I say this having many friends in that community, Bellaterra has become overdeveloped. Enough is enough. Once again, I urge a yes vote on item 27. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Next speaker, thank you so much for being here.
I'm Andy Einhorn, Huntington Beach. With a heavy heart, I dedicate this discussion to those that have experienced hate. It is imperative that the Huntington Beach City Council does not include individuals who propagate hate ideologies. We must firmly reject the culture of racism that has infected this governmental body. The time for excuses is over. According to an article in the Surf City Sentinel, and I quote, Huntington Beach City Council Gracie Vandermark has been identified as a proven advocate of hatred, unquote. Peter Livy from the Anti-Defamation League has stated, and I quote, there is substantial evidence of Vandermark's bigoted and hateful comments and her participation in activities led by white supremacists. Although she's attempted to delete a significant portion of the anti-Semitic and racist online history, Levy concluded that her conduct is deeply disturbing and warrants investigation. It should be known that scrubbing information represents a consciousness of guilt. Rabbi Stephen Einstein of the Fountain Valley congregation has requested, and I quote, that you thoroughly investigate this matter and take action, unquote. An Orange County Weekly article by Gabriel San Roman, and I quote, Ocean View School Board trustee Gina Clayton Tarvin denounced Vandermark's hateful statements and recommended her removal, unquote. Her second quote, do you believe that a representative of our city should be publicly denying the Holocaust and posted it as a hoax? These comments and accusations go beyond the boundaries of hate and racism and represent the worst kind of sins. By aligning yourself with racists, some members of this council risk destroying their own careers. It is essential that you understand you are trespassing on the values of this city and this country. Therefore, I urge you to take the following action plan. I am requesting for the 5th time from this podium to appoint an external board that would conduct a thorough, ethical, nonpartisan investigation into the council member who has been accused of making racist statements.
10 seconds.
Saying no to hate reaffirms the choices we have made to stand up and say, these racist comments are not okay. Thank you.
Next speaker, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Strickland and council members. My name is Russell Neal, and I live in Huntington Beach. I would like to first request that the council disregard the statements of the previous speaker. June is the month when we are forced to confront the assault on our nation that is Pride Month. Personally, I would like to talk about the budget tonight, but that is not a real option. Pride leads the list of the 7 deadly sins. It was pride that caused Satan to rebel and say, I will go up. I will be like the Most High. Pride was Satan's appeal to man, saying, you will be as God, knowing good and evil. That led to man's original sin and downfall. We are also informed that it is the meek, not the proud, who will inherit the earth. Pride, we are told, in contrast, goes before a fall, and a haughty look before destruction. Personally, I would like to see us avoid destruction. This year, the focus of Pride celebration has shifted from concern over the rights of gay individuals to overt trashing of any religion and frenetic targeting and grooming of other people's children. This is no longer about what consulting adults do in private. Shockingly, our own Huntington Beach Public Library has jumped out into the front of this targeting and grooming of children with its Rainbow Book Month program and Pride activity kits. If any individual was showing this material to neighborhood children, it would be criminal. It is no less criminal for our city-owned and controlled library to be doing this. I urge this council to put a stop to this abomination. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Tim Geddes, and I have been voting in Huntington Beach elections, every election since 1984. I have seen some dangerous things put on primary ballots for a long time here. Two examples of March Madness primaries from this century occurred in 2002 and 2004. In 2002, a deceptive measure named Measure EE sought to amend the city charter to prevent the city council from ever enacting a rent stabilization ordinance in the city. It was promoted as a property rights initiative despite the impact it would have on manufactured housing homeowners in taking away their residential property rights. It might be noted that Measure EE was opposed at this time by the majority of the city council. However, a ton of special interest money, especially from mobile home park owners and their partisan real estate and political allies, was able to hornswoggle the electorate, and the measure passed, paving the way to Section 803 of the city charter, which bans all forms of rent control. The results of this primary have been an albatross around the neck of mobile home park residents ever since, and has allowed a pattern of space rent spiking and other abuses that currently continue. In March of 2004, the infamous Measure E, commonly referred to as the districting initiative, was on the ballot. Once again, a majority of the city council opposed this partisan effort to carve up the city into 5 districts that would eliminate the election of citywide council members and allow a divide and conquer strategy by special interests to seize control of the city. Fortunately, it failed. Now we have another spurious March Madness primary vote, which could hit us next year if tonight's agenda item 26 is adopted. This from Majority Council Member Pat, don't call me Pride Flag Burns, to have the mayor head a charter review ad hoc committee allowing him to choose 2 other council cronies to possibly wreak further havoc on our civic norms with proposed charter revisions. We all know that his choices will not be the council members with an actual depth of experience in doing this. Will the results be another Measure EE or another Measure E? I fear the worst. I urge the council to insist on diversity on any ad hoc committee so that actual representation from other factions of the council, not just the majority, is achieved.
10 seconds.
That would allow for true democracy in the process. And I just might add, one of my favorite, I'm a baseball fan, as you might be able to tell, Pride of the Yankees. Do we have to change the name?
Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Good evening. I ask that you would open your hearts and minds as I read the following. Master of the universe, teach us at this moment in history to honor the inherent dignity in every person, realizing that although we are not all created with the same image, we were all created in your holy image. Bless us with the wisdom and the recognition that we can disagree without ever becoming disagreeable, that we can battle ideas without ever battling people, and that our minds can carry differences of opinions as long as we are united as one. Oh God, channel our hearts so that they pulsate love and empathy rather than emit hatred and apathy. Focus our eyes so that they may see the endless potential in people's divine souls rather than see the limits of their physical bodies. Tune our voices so that they speak words and sing songs of unity and empowerment rather than tones of discord and division. Guide our hands and feet so that they become your instruments of kindness and peace rather than tools of cruelty and destructiveness. Help us to fulfill the unique purpose of which you have created us, to each in our own way by becoming your ambassadors of light and goodness in your world. Today we need this more than yesterday, at every moment, in every place, and with every person we encounter. Eternal guardian who never slumbers nor sleeps, fortify, and inspire our elected officials so that they may govern our city with humility, courage, strength, compassion, sensitivity, and vision to uphold the divine principles and values that we all aspire to. To quote our great teacher Moses, "May it be your will that the glory of your presence dwells in the work of our hands. Indeed, may it dwell in this work of the hands of our city leaders and of all the citizens of this city." Finally, we pray to you, O God, that we may witness the fulfillment of your promises. How beautiful in the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings good news, the good news of peace and salvation, the news that the God of Zion reigns. May it happen speedily. And I would ask that you would join me in a moment of reflection.
Ten seconds.
Thank you for your courtesy and respect as I came to the podium this evening.
Thank you for being here. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Glemm, and I'm a longtime resident and homeowner in Huntington Beach. I also love trivia. Did you know that the original pledge was a marketing ploy written for the Columbian Exposition in October 1892 to mark the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas? The pledge wasn't actually standardized until World War II and did not contain "under God." That was added as a bulwark against communism in February 1954. Did you know that several of our founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, and Monroe, practiced a faith called deism? It is a philosophical belief in human reason as a reliable means of solving social and political problems. Isn't that amazing when you read some history? To give an example that being inclusive isn't difficult, I will leave you with a modified invocation written by Angela Parra of Florida and given to the council in Florida this morning. Council members, city administration, and staff, we are grateful to you for long hours and for the often underappreciated time, effort, and personal sacrifice that comes with your dedication to your constituents. With that in mind, consider the words of physician, philosopher, and humanitarian Albert Schweitzer, who said, "The purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others." As you serve and help others, we ask that you persevere in working together to find solutions for the challenges of our city. We encourage you turn to and away from the prevailing preoccupation with our differences and focus instead on the similarities shared by the richly diverse citizenry of Huntington Beach. We hope the mutual love of friends and family and our collective hopes and dreams will inspire you to deliberate selflessly. It is through your generous commitment of time, energy, and creativity that you can make a better future for Huntington Beach. And I'll close with one more quote from our cultural anthropologist, Margaret Mead,
10
who
seconds.
famously said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Good evening, Mayor Strickland and council members. My name's Pat Goodman. On October 2nd, 2021, an ocean oil spill happened off our coast. The The FAA and Coast Guard were the lead agencies of this situation. They called for closures of beaches and airspace so that emergency vehicles could have unobstructed access and to protect the health and safety of human life. This prevented the air show from going forward on that last day, October 3rd. The four most recently elected city council members campaigned on the promise to bring back the air show. And I didn't know it was gone, but they also campaigned on the promise to bring back transparency to our local government and campaigned on the promise to unleash the city attorney to fight in the courts for taxpayer interests. These promises were all broken when you approved a nearly $8 million payout over 6 years to a friend, a local company, and political ally without any justification that we can see. The action has been widely reported in the press, and the facts are based on a summary of the settlement provided by the city attorney. However, the full details of the settlement have yet to be released. I believe that you have broken these promises, campaign promises, and owe an explanation to all the taxpayers of Huntington Beach, and especially those who voted for you. Some might say the economic advantage to the city coffers far outweighs the payment to a vendor over 6 years of $7.5 million. If that is the case, let's see the prior year's city financial reports for the air show and projections based on the data to justify this expenditure of public funds. Let's also see the costs incurred by the Code 4 PAS on October 3rd, 2021. No doubt this business incurred losses, but so did others. Their losses should be covered by its business interruption insurance and the settlement with the oil company. I don't believe the city has any liability and should not be obliged to make these payments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Thanks for being here.
Good evening. My name is Kenny Noe. I'm a 50-year resident of Huntington Beach, and I'm here to talk about, at the last city council meeting, I also brought up the question of the air show settlement. Please understand that I support the air show, and I believe it provides a lot of value to this community. I requested a meeting with City Attorney Michael Gates for the purpose of discussing the terms of the settlement. And on May 26th, I had the opportunity to meet with him to present some of my questions, to which I received some answers. And I do appreciate the courtesy of this in-person meeting because I believe we should deal with the facts. Thank you. First question. Given the fact that the Coast Guard and other agencies declared Huntington Beach to be under a state of emergency due to conditions which were considered to be hazardous to the health of the participants and attendees of the air show, I asked why Huntington Beach should be liable for the lost profits of any damages claimed by the cancellation of the last day of the air show. I was told by the city attorney that due to current circumstances, which he explained to me, that this information was not available at this point in time. And I respect that. I respect the candidness in that regard. I look forward to at some point in time getting more information when that condition ceases. The other question was, why didn't the city include the dismissal of the lawsuit against Mayor Kim Carr at the same time that they settled with the promoter? That settlement would have saved the city a lot of money in terms of additional legal fees that she now has to face. The answer to that question was, this was a city council decision as part of the settlement. Another question was, have all the city council members received full copies of the settlement agreement? And the comment there, and I'll try not to take this out of context. Okay, I'm going to try to be. It says, I cannot comment specifically on what occurred in my confidential meetings with city council on a Pacific Air Show lawsuit and settlement, but I can say that the handling of this matter occurred just like every other case. So that was the response to that question. Although, I didn't get real answers to some of my questions, I understand the reasons why, and I appreciate the fact that you took the time to explain that to me. But I do believe at some point in time, the people of this city will need to know the answer to those questions because I think they deserve to know why we spent over $7 million to settle this. I appreciate and respect your office and the fact that you took the time to meet with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Good evening, council members and Mayor Strickland. My name's Connie Boardman. I'm a former Huntington Beach mayor and council member. And I wasn't going to speak tonight, but then I heard that hate expressed towards the LGBTQ plus community. After the majority of you effectively banned the gay pride flag to fly during the month of June, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that some of your supporters would suggest that books relating to the LGBTQ plus community should be restricted or banned from our library. I mean, we all saw the hate. We all saw the hate, intolerance, and bigotry exhibited by some of your supporters during the 3 hearings on the pride flag issue. And here again tonight, I just heard the same intolerance and hate. Those full of intolerance seem to think they should be the ones who decide what all the other residents in Huntington Beach have access to in our libraries. But you know, there's a real simple solution to that issue. If you see a book you don't like, don't check it out. If you see a book you don't think your kids should read, don't let your kids check them out.
Hold on. You stop the time.
What?
Hold on. You hold the time. Let's have order in the chamber. Thank you.
Okay, but you don't get to make decisions for what's appropriate for other parents or guardians as far as what their children read. What the intolerant are saying is they don't trust other parents and guardians in our community to decide for their own families what kind of books their kids should be reading. I do want to thank our librarians for featuring books about the LGBTQ plus community during Pride Month. The topics covered and resources found in these books can literally be a lifeline to members of this historically marginalized community. If one trans or gay kid feels less isolated, less alone, and more understood because he, she, or they had access to a book, that's a huge win. So thanks to our librarians. You know, there's no more denying that this hate towards the LGBTQ plus community exists here in Huntington Beach. Exposing that bigotry and hate is a good thing, because then it can be opposed. And calling it out and exposing it and opposing it is important, because this kind of hate is harmful and dangerous to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Thanks for being here. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir. My name's Melvin Sterling. I spent 4 years in the U.S. Navy living with anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, anti-Semitism, anti-everything you could think of. And then I went to medical school in Chicago, and I saw that anti-Black in its most violent form. So I wanted a calm place to raise our children. So we came here to Huntington Beach, and I needed to make a living, so I got a job at UCI, where I became director of the emergency department, and as luck would have it, the director of the Level 1 Trauma Center for the County of Orange. And I'm here to tell you that it was my sad experience to treat the people who were victims of and you name it, anti-Asian, anti-Black, anti-Semitic, and there's a whole list of antis. And that's not why I moved to Huntington Beach. And so I'm here, my hat is off to Mr. Einhorn for his comments, and I'm here to ask you, the people who help keep Huntington Beach safe for everybody, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, everybody, just like it says in this document. So I'm here to ask for you to help to do the things that we elected you to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Next speaker, thanks so much for being here.
Evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Adam Wood with the Building Industry Association. Thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight. We are here on item 27 regarding the decertification on the EIR. Our friends at the Building Industry Legal Defense Foundation submitted a letter. It's in all of your inboxes. I hope you have the opportunity to review that. The last thing we need is more litigation in the city. I'm here on behalf of BIAOC tonight to ask the fundamental question of what is it that we're trying to accomplish with this measure. It seems like in the report or the memo that was issued as part of this, it's a swing at housing once again. This really isn't an effective way to do it. In less than 30 days, you're going to see AB 2011 take effect. That is a ministerial, CEQA exempt way of getting housing approved in commercial zones. If you go forward with getting rid of the locally controlled created means of creating housing in Huntington Beach, you're left with nothing but the state-controlled means, which is AB 2011. This will ultimately result in a denser housing product brought to the city. It doesn't make any sense. What this ultimately does is has an outsized source. There is no AB 2011 for the commercial folks here in Huntington Beach. We've talked with multiple business owners along the Beach Boulevard corridor, and no one understands what it is that we're trying to accomplish with this. So we're really hopeful that we can get some clarity on where we're going with this, because this seems like it's going to have an outsized negative impact on the Huntington Beach business community, a marginal impact for the housing numbers under what we have structured there currently. It just takes away your control of those housing and results in everyone having to go the AB 2011 approach. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, at least from what we've heard from everyone. So appreciate some clarification, and we'll be very interested. Well, ultimately, we hope this doesn't go forward, but if it does, we're hoping that you can find a way that doesn't have to result in litigation, which is something we see as potentially likely. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Next speaker, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Mayor Strickland, City Council members. I wasn't planning on talking tonight, but I was. I thought that it was really important that I say something about what's going on with the air show, because I think the Huntington Beach Visitors Bureau did an extensive study. They looked at the impact that it makes in the city, and you're looking at $70 million a year, and then also it's another $50 million, so it's like $120 million a year impact to local economy. And if you amortize that over the 7-year period you're talking about, you're looking at over $840 million that it impacts the city and impacts this local market. So to be crying about a small amount of a settlement that impacts the city in such a major way is absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's something that the citizens in this community look forward to every year. It's now the preeminent air show in the country, if not the world. And it's being replicated in Australia. They want to replicate it on the East Coast because it's a very well-run organization and it impacts the city in a very, very positive way. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Just the last call for Ann Dansborough, if you didn't hear me. Otherwise, that concludes public comments.
All right. It looks like we're concluding public comments. Members, let's go down the agenda. Council committee appointments by any members. Does any member have anything to announce? Seeing none, moving forward. AB 1234 reporting. Does any member have anything to report? Seeing none, moving forward. Openness and negotiation disclosure. Does any member have anything to disclose? Councilman.
I spoke with POA.
Okay. All right. Moving forward, city manager's report. City manager, please introduce your reports.
Mayor Strickland, members of the council, the first item, item 11, trustee Mike Posey submitted a report for the May meeting of the Vector Control Board, and that has been introduced as a supplemental communication for the public and yourselves. Item 12, I would like to introduce Dr. Richard Bernard from the firm FM3. Dr. Bernard will be presenting to you, Mayor Strickland, and members of the council, the first quality of life community survey results, which will be a summary of the larger survey that Dr. Bernard will be finalizing in the next week or so and submitting to the city and sharing with the public. This is a very important effort because by doing this on a biennial basis, the city council and the public can view the trend lines on different topics of importance, and it will help all of us measure our progress in addressing important matters such as homelessness and others. So with that, I would like to ask Dr. Richard Bernard to come down and present to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard, for being here.
Good evening, Mayor Strickland, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, City staff. I want to thank you for inviting me to present the results or the preliminary results of your residence survey. Okay, great. I want to start with the methodology. We conducted the survey between May 10th and the 16th, so very fresh data. We interviewed a random sample of 533 Huntington Beach residents who are adults 18 years of age or older. For the full sample, questions asked of everyone, the margin of error is plus or minus 4.4%. Because we had so many questions of interest, in some cases we randomly had half the sample asked, we were asked some questions and another random half others. There, the margin of error is a little larger at 6.2. We contacted residents by telephone, email, and text, and they had the opportunity to answer the survey either by telephone or online, depending on how they were randomly selected. The survey was available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And if you're very quick on math and notice something doesn't quite equal 100%, you can attribute that to rounding. So if I can begin, start with the general community attitudes. We asked how folks would rate Huntington Beach as a place to live. And we gave them the option of excellent, good, fair, or poor. And 78% had a favorable view of living in the city, with almost 3 in 10 saying excellent. 20% said fair, which often people define as sort of average, and only 2% said poor. So comparatively, these are very good numbers, certainly to start off the survey. We then asked them, and generally speaking, would they say Huntington Beach is headed in the right direction, or is it pretty seriously off on the wrong track? And here the community was split. 41% said right direction, 41% said wrong track, and 18% said they didn't know enough to offer an opinion. In this day and age, this is not entirely uncharacteristic of some communities where there's a split on many topics, and this was clearly one of them. And then we presented them randomly, so there was no order effect, a list of issues, and asked them if these were extremely serious problems, which is a bright orange, very serious problems, which is a mid-color orange, somewhat serious problems, which is a dull orange, or not too serious a problem, and some folks said they didn't know enough to offer an opinion. I've aggregated and ranked the extremely and very serious problems in these two slides. We introduced 15 issues, and what you could see rises to the top is the issue of homelessness. That's clearly a major issue, not unique to the city, but clearly the top issue that we asked about in the survey. And then the next two items are more bread and butter issues that we also see in many communities, which is the cost of housing and associated cost of living. You'll notice that property crime, like burglaries and car thefts, is sort of a second order, not to minimize it, but 55% said extremely or very serious. We're seeing this throughout Southern California, very specifically, and if you drop down to the bottom, you'll see crime in general is 11 points lower in terms of serious concerns. So very specifically about property crime. On the next slide, you could see the items start to decrease substantially in terms of extremely and very serious problems. Among the lowest items are the lack of enforcement of rules about short-term rentals and the lack of parking in commercial areas. Now, I'd like to move to satisfaction with city services. We asked a general question about rating sort of the job performance of the city services that the city provides. And 2/3, 67%, said they were either very or somewhat satisfied with the services. I think that's a very good starting point in terms of their opinions of your services. 28% said somewhat dissatisfied and or very dissatisfied, with only 10% saying very dissatisfied. We then isolated individual city services. Specifically, we asked about 20 services. We randomized it again. And there we gave them a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is not at all satisfied and 7 is very satisfied. And we asked them to provide the number they thought was most closely associated with their opinion. The blue bar are the folks who said 6 or 7, that I would define as very satisfied. The dark blue, the lighter blue or the brighter blue is somewhat satisfied. The light gray bar is neutral. Since it's a scale of 1 to 7, 4 is the midpoint. And then the orange, the bright orange, are the folks who gave 1 to 3, which is not at all satisfied in some degree. And then for those people who are comfortable with averages or means, I've also provided them on the right-hand side. But I've ranked it by very satisfied, the 6 and 7. And here, of the 20 services, all of them rank above the midpoint. So that's good, because they're all in the satisfaction area. Among the leads are common services that we see in most citizen satisfaction surveys, specifically fire protection, paramedics, special events, library, 911 response, pickup of trash, bulk items, yard waste and recyclables, and police protection. You're somewhat of an unusual city in the sense that you provide water services, and so we don't always ask that, but here the reliability of water received at your home, i.e. if they turn on the faucet and it comes out, that seems very reliable, is quite high and is among the highest. On the second list of the 20 items, a couple of things I just wanted to point out. The third item, the city-run youth programs, and the fourth item, programs and services for seniors, you'll notice a large percentage of people, a little bit more than a third, didn't feel comfortable to give an answer. Not surprising. If you don't have a child in your household, or you don't have a senior, or you don't know a senior in the city, you may not be familiar with those services. That partly explains why those numbers are lower, because they're made up of the don't knows. However, it has no impact on the mean score because we excluded it there. A few items of note that come to about a quarter of the concern in terms of the not at all satisfied. The quality of home drinking water, which is a different question than the reliability of drinking water. Enforcement of city rules and regulations to keep neighborhoods safe and clean. Communication with residents. And enforcement of city rules and regulations requiring owners to keep their properties well maintained. And then next, we focused a little bit on the beaches, which of course you are extremely well known for, and folks in and out of the city have high regard for your city beaches. We wanted to get a sense of whether they felt there was a need for improvements in a variety of aspects of the city beaches. So we mentioned aspects again randomly, and we asked, do you think there's a great need, some need, a little need, or no real need for improvements of that aspect? All of these items that you see on the slide are, if you include the great or some need, are above 50%. In fact, 61% or higher, but the lead items are improving safety and cleanliness at public bathrooms, upgrading the maintenance of public bathrooms. It's sort of a different framing of a somewhat similar item, and providing separated paths for walking from biking, skateboard riding, or scooter riding. So clearly there is an interest in some kind of improvements with respect to beach amenities. And then finally, we tested a number of sources of information, 19 in fact, 19 of them. And we asked, how frequently do you use this source of information to get information about Huntington Beach? And we gave them the option of frequently, occasionally, rarely, never, and that sliver of gray are the folks who don't know. And I've aggregated the frequently and occasionally on the right-hand side. Word of mouth from friends and family, number one. It's a very close-knit community and people talk, and that's how partly they get their information. And then among the actual sort of sources provided by others, city mailers sent to your home. So in spite of the increase in the use of social media, the old-fashioned way still is quite prominent in the city. The SANS program, Recreation, Community, and Library Services Guide. This is one of the items that people actually generally keep in their house because there are activities through the year, and so that's something they don't just toss out. And the Huntington Beach neighborhood Facebook groups or other groups run by local residents, and of course the city's website. And as I go down the list, you could see significant declines in terms of the percentages of use. But I would conclude by suggesting that the city continue to use multiple sources of information and not rely on just one or two in order for people to hear the messages and information you're putting out to the public in a variety of ways, which again will be shared by word of mouth. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your patience.
I just have some, where did the 533 people, how'd you find them?
Sure. If you'll let me, I'll just go back to the methodology so you'll see, everyone can see it in front. We took a list of all residential addresses in the city, and then we matched them to publicly and commercially available databases to get their names, emails, and phone numbers. And then we randomly selected folks and either online sent them an email invitation, sent them a text, or called them. And then we made sure that the demographics of the respondents mirrored the demographics of your community, so we had a nice representation of the community.
Go ahead, Council.
Thank you, and thank you for, we have statistically relevant data finally. It's nice to be able to kind of grasp other things, and two things kind of jumped out at me were that obviously homelessness was the number one concern, but that too much growth and the cost of housing were kind of inverse to what I would expect them to be. That actually too much growth was less than 50% of the respondents. So that's just something that jumped out. What I found fascinating though was that most folks are getting their information from friends and family. I'd like to know who those people are getting their information from. Is this abnormal for cities that you see survey results that folks are getting things from friends and family? And is it, their friends happen to be their spouse because their spouse is the one that's on social media? But it was just really interesting to see that was I would like to see the city's official something or another be number one there.
Right. Well, I guess the good news is you're not unique in the sense it is very common. And I suspect, given the percentages that you see in a variety of sources, people are getting from a variety of sources, and they're sharing it at the kitchen table, they're sharing it when they meet up with friends and the like. I couldn't tell you if they were only spouses or only friends or neighbors, but this isn't unusual. And in most cities, the city sources are a little farther down the list, like yours. Typically, if there's a major paper or something, but local paper, that's often a source. But I don't think there's anything particularly unusual. It always strikes me in this day and age that the city mailers are still like really high up there. And so I just think when people say, oh, we want to save some money and we should just put everything online, that they need to be mindful that there are a whole bunch of folks who are actually relying on that to learn things.
It's interesting, though, that also that the water bill has a different response rate than just city mailing, too.
Right, and there's an age difference, interesting. Well, not surprisingly, right? 18 to 49, not so much, and people 50 plus, much more so, the water bill.
Which is closer to our median age, so that's really interesting. So would it be statistically relevant in the next round to ask the folks that are hearing things from friends and family to ask them, do you know where they're getting their sources from? Or is that...
that's certainly a fair question to ask. I mean, I'll tell you, the staff had so many great questions, and we have such small real estate because, this was a 20-minute survey, and we want to be super respectful of your voters and your residents in general, right? And we want to be mindful that we don't want them on for 30 minutes because none of them will like you if that's the case. So it's a question of, what rises to the top. If that's a question that the council is interested in, it's an easy question to ask.
I'm just trying to, we want to be able to engage folks in the best way possible.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that we did this, like Councilmember Kelmick said, to get some statistically relevant data so that we can look in the future and actually see what progress we're making, at least from the community's perception. Obviously, the information sources are a concern. We want to make sure that the facts are getting out there, and it can be challenging if it's word of mouth. It's like telephone, ultimately. But we mentioned that there will be a final report. Will we be able to get some more drill down detail like you just discussed about the demographics for the different information sources and things like that?
Yeah, there will be much more details to come, yes.
Okay, great. And also it was interesting to me that housing affordability went so high up on that list as well.
Again, your city is not unique, particularly in this day and age. But that has a very broad definition. Mm-hmm. For some, it's housing I can afford to buy, and for others, it's a concern about, the historically defined affordable housing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for your hard work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your opportunity.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Members, we're moving down the agenda. We're on file item 13, City Attorney's Report. City Attorney, please introduce your report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, a couple updates on the first case, City of Huntington Beach versus State of California Department of Finance case. The state's Department of Finance sent a letter to the city last week indicating their confirmation of the approval of payment on the $22.4 million that's being returned to Huntington Beach by the state of California. That DOF letter is significant because it basically means that there will not be an appeal in this case of the lower court's ruling in this case. So we will be submitting for that amount of money. With interest, it's closer to $25 million, and then in addition to the $6.8 million that the court already awarded in a previous decision, it's about $32 million coming to the city of Huntington Beach from the state of California. So I just wanted to give an update on the procedural status of the case, that there is no appeal.
Thank you. That's something to be proud of. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you very much
for your hard work.
On the second, is it just an update on the air show lawsuit settlement? Because there's been a lot of questions, including like the ones from Mr. Inouye. As many in the community know, in 2022, the Pacific Air Show sued the city of Huntington Beach over the city's cancellation of the Sunday portion of the 2021 air show. It was from that cancellation and from the pending lawsuit that Pacific Air Show communicated that it was not planning to return to the city if it could not reach a compromise in the lawsuit. Without revealing any confidential communications or details of closed session discussions with City Council, I can reiterate that a settlement was reached between the Pacific Air Show and the City of Huntington Beach on May 9th. The settlement was announced the same day, yet there are still questions, even criticisms about the settlement itself. In fact, there was a recent Voice of OC article that makes a number of errors and misrepresentations, raising concerns about ethics and transparency of the settlement itself, fed by what the article attributes to as a minority faction of city council members. While I cannot comment specifically on what occurred in my confidential meetings with council or what was discussed, I can say that the handling of this settlement occurred just like it does in every other case. Any notion that somehow there are questions or concerns over ethics or transparency are completely without merit. With regard to process, which the public should know, in settlement negotiations in all cases, all negotiated terms are presented to the entire city council in writing and discussed in closed session. In settlement negotiations in all cases, all negotiated terms are voted on by the entire city council. In settlement negotiations in all cases, there is no negotiated term in a final settlement that the city council has not seen in writing, discussed, and authorized by a vote. Publicly published closed session agendas show that I met with city council in closed session on this Pacific Air Show case a number of times between December 2022 and the May settlement. Suffice it to say, city council was directly involved. I will say, too, without commenting on anything discussed in closed session, no city council member has ever sent me an email, a letter, or told me that they ever had any ethical concerns or concerns about transparency in the approximate 5 months of settlement negotiations. Not once. After the air show lawsuit was settled in May, a summary of negotiated terms was released to the public, including on a number of occasions. A summary, not the entire signed agreement, was released pursuant and according to state law. That is specifically government code, if you want to look it up, section 54957.1, subsection A, 3B, providing for the disclosure of, quote, the substance of the agreement. The reason the settlement was announced in this way is a few reasons. One, the government code does not expressly require the disclosure of the entire final settlement agreement. Two, the City Council authorized in December of 2022 pursuit of legal action against oil spill defendants in a new city lawsuit. Because of that potential pending litigation, the law creates an exception for disclosure of documents under government code sections, if you want to look it up, 7927.200 and 7927.205 to not require disclosure of documents or records that may affect litigation. The city has always followed the law, and this air show settlement was handled in the exact same way that all other settlements have occurred in the past. Literally nothing was done differently in this case. As such, any criticism by anyone, including statements that appear in the recent Voice of OC article, is completely without merit, and continuing to make such statements, frankly, only serves to harm the city, which we all have a duty to act in the best interest of. With that, that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Councilwoman.
So you said that it was done in the same way that all past settlements have been done as far as like the availability of the settlement agreement information. Is that right?
Yes, on my watch.
Okay, so there are, in the Laserfiche, there are available settlements.
There may have been some reason that those were disclosed. They were not disclosed by me, and if they exist, you can send one to me and I can review them.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I will add that not only has it been done the exact same way on my watch for nearly the past 10 years, but it was done the exact same way by my predecessors as well.
Anything else from members?
Yeah, just you brought up a point that I think is worth repeating, that there's no negotiated term in a settlement that the city council has not seen in writing. We discussed and we authorized by a vote. And to go to the press and allude to anything different or infer that there's any wrongdoing has occurred is absurd, and frankly, I find it outrageous. So this is modus operandi, this happens in every single case that's settled. So to say it, go to the press and say that's different, I think is absurd.
Anything else? All right. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
I've tried to remain very calm and graceful through all of our differences. But the fact that the three of you guys keep going to the papers and bashing us doesn't help our city. And we've had people constantly saying they want us to get along, but if you think we're unethical, maybe you should have a conversation with us about that instead of going out there and telling the papers without having any discussions with us. So we're trying to develop a cohesive relationship, but these constant attacks do not help us and they do not help our city. So that's actually all I have to say. It's pretty upsetting to pick up the paper and then hear our council members call us unethical. Ms. Bolton over here saying that's just the way they roll. And if by that what you mean is that we are keeping our promises to our constituents, you are correct. And there will be more of that.
Councilwoman.
I will say that I think that ultimately we'll have to let a judge decide about that. We'll let a judge decide about whether it's appropriate to not release the settlement agreement to the public, and that'll be that.
Okay.
Just for the record, because for the record, there's no lawsuit on this and there's no threat of any lawsuit. So I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I don't want the public to be further confused. The purpose of my report was to come level with the status of the airshow settlement and to answer questions that I've received from the public about how this all takes place. And I just wanted to explain the process and that it's the same in every single case. And the government code, we follow state law. So if you know something I don't know, I guess we can talk offline. But for the public's benefit, I do not know of any pending litigation, threat of litigation, or current litigation on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, let's move on to file item 15, City Clerk's report. City Clerk, please introduce your report.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't really have any slide presentation or anything. The reason why this item has been placed on the agenda, it's kind of an introduction of a new monthly report that we'll provide so that our city council, our citizens, our staff has a kind of like a high-level summary of the activity of our city boards, commissions, committees. We kind of created this spreadsheet or portal that staff can access who are involved in handling these meetings, record information. We also add a link to meeting minutes inside this report so that members of our public can go ahead and go into the attachment and it takes them straight to the notes so they can find out what's going on. And it's all in one place rather than trying to pick and choose on our website where those agendas minutes are. And then we hope to also include in our next report any reporting out by our council liaisons to outside agencies and other bodies. And I think people are interested in knowing that. And then it's all in one place. And it's quick and it's a summary.
So if I might speak on that item, I've already let staff know that I'm not going to be participating in this program. Every one of these meetings are publicly noticed. Everyone is open to the public. I do believe it just adds another layer of bureaucracy on each one of our council members. If there's something that's so desired that we need to report to the council members, we could do that at our discretion. And so for those reasons, I've at least told staff that I'm not going to be participating in this program. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible to include whether the liaisons were present at those meetings in the notes for that?
That's all public. That's all public documents.
Whether the liaison was present at the meeting is a
That's
public
all public.
document? This is the public document.
No, it's all public. You can
This
go
isn't
to each
actually-
one of these departments, and you can find out who was there and who was not.
Yeah, I will just clarify that this isn't actual, this isn't the minute or recording document of that committee. The staff liaisons are just putting in interest points that they think the public would be interested in, whether it be a new project or a decision on something that, the community is interested in knowing that type of thing.
It's an interest point for me. I'm just curious if they might be able to add that just as an option. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to just make an observation. So it's been my understanding that we do these reports as a convenience to the voters and the community so that they understand what all we're doing, the meetings that we're going to, the various regional organizations that the city is a part of. Because I think it's a lot to expect the residents to go and figure out, if they're interested in regional discussions about transportation, figure out which agencies or bodies have an impact on that and which ones we're a member of and which ones we're not. I just think that's expecting a lot. So I appreciate the fact that you guys are putting that together for everybody, and I would hope that everybody participates in it because, again, it's a convenience for our residents. Thanks.
Anything else from members? Okay, let's move on. Members will go to the consent calendar. Items 16 through 23. Would any member like to pull an item? No? So do I have a motion and a second to, it's been moved?
I'll make the motion.
I'll
Been moved,
second.
it's been seconded. Clerk, call the roll on the consent calendar.
Certainly, and I just want to remind everybody, I put a little memo out about a minor correction to the City Council minutes of May 16. So I'll go ahead and call roll. Councilmember Kalmick?
Aye.
Mosier?
Aye.
Vandermark?
Yes.
Strickland?
Aye.
McKeon?
Yes.
Bolton?
Aye.
Burns?
Aye.
Item passes 7-0.
Okay, members, now we're moving on to file item number 24, public hearing. Staff, please introduce your report.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Tonight, we'll be presenting the fiscal year 23-24 budget for potential adoption this evening. So just as a quick overview, we'll be presenting an update on the fiscal year 22-23 general fund, as well as an overview of the proposed 23-24 general fund budget and the proposed 23-24 capital improvement budget, as well as the 23-24 budget approval and key considerations. So first, we'd like to start with just a brief economic overview and just local impacts that would impact the budget. So currently, economic trends indicate a continued economic recovery from the financial impacts of COVID-19. However, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, as well as other regional banks, are likely to restrict the availability of credit, and economists largely expect some form of recession by the end of 2023. So US real GDP did increase by 3.2% in Q3 of 22. However, it did decrease slightly in Q4 of 22 and is expected to slow in the first quarter of 23 to 1.1. Overall, consumer spending did accelerate, but was offset by weaknesses in housing, a decline in inventories, as well as an overall contraction in business equipment spending. The Federal Reserve's continued in trend of increasing rates for the 10th time in just over a year, with the current rates between 5 to 5.25%. However, Chairman Powell has currently softened their language to potentially allow for a pause in rate hikes sometime this year. However, the yield curve at this time does remain significantly inverted. As we do emerge from the economic impacts of the pandemic, we are still continuing to monitor recent developments in the economy, including the Russia-Ukraine crisis, inflation, supply chain challenges, rising interest rates, and labor shortages. So just as a quick reminder from our study session, the city is still projected to conclude the current fiscal year with a $3.8 million general fund surplus. Of course, this is still subject to change. So this is just a quick recap of the 23-24 general fund proposed budget. So we're pleased to announce that it is structurally balanced with a planned $3.6 million surplus. So this planned $3.6 million surplus will be used to address upcoming items that have not been included in the budget at this time, such as future labor negotiations, potential litigation impacts, as well as other liabilities relating to workers' comp and so on. So we do have recurring revenues of $278 million, one-time revenues of $2.3 million related to the Emerald Cove settlement from the Department of Finance, as well as a planned use of reserves of $8.8 million, for a total sources of funds of $289 million. We have total expenditures of $285 million to, again, bring a planned surplus of 3.6. So we do have continued infrastructure investments in the upcoming fiscal year, which increased by 11% up to $15 million. And so the current CIP budget total is $41.2 million, which decreased from prior year largely due to the use of HB recovery funds in the current fiscal year, as well as a $6.6 million grant for the Heil pump station. So this is just an overview of our proposed revenues for fiscal year 23-24. So as you can see, property tax and sales tax do make up the largest portion of our revenues, and our overall recurring revenues are expected to increase by $4.8 million from the current fiscal year. So some of the major revenue variances from the current fiscal year include property tax with a $4.3 million increase, largely due to higher assessed valuations. And then there's also an expected decrease in transient occupancy tax, just due to the change in travel patterns as global travel continues to rise as we emerge from the pandemic. The use of money and property is expected to increase by 11.9%, or $2.1 million, largely due to increased parking and lease and concession revenues. And then non-operating revenues are largely decreasing by $27.3 million due to the one-time infusion of federal funds from the American Rescue Plan Act of $29.6 million. So then next, we have an overview of the 23-24 general fund proposed expenditures of $285 million. So we have them broken out two separate ways. So one by category. So as you can see on the chart to the left, personnel does make up the largest portion of our general fund budget. And then we do also have with 63.6%. And we have followed by operating at 19%, and then transfers and debt service. Alternatively, we also have our expenditure budget split by department as well. So then you can see that we do have our largest portion of our budget dedicated to public safety, with police at 29.6% of the budget and fire at 19.8% of the budget. So some of the major expenditure variances include an increase in personnel costs of $10.6 million, which are largely attributable to increases in workers' comp costs, an increase in the PERS normal cost, and then continuing impacts from previous MOUs that were approved in fiscal year 21-22. Additionally, we are also asking for council's approval this evening for the addition of 11 new FTEs, which will be discussed in further slides. So we also have transfers out of $42.7 million, which in prior year included transfers of $18.1 million for authorized HB recovery projects. So one of the other additional major expenditure variances does include the planned use of reserves of $8.8 million, which is the full appropriation of the AES reserve of $4.9 million, which will be used for various capital improvement projects related to the Southeast area, as well as the appropriation and transfer of $3.9 million from the equipment replacement reserve to the Equipment Replacement Fund to cover critical infrastructure and public safety vehicle needs and equipment needs as well. So the next, we just wanted to go over the positions that are being recommended for council approval this evening. So as mentioned, we are proposing 11 new general fund positions in the upcoming budget. So we are requesting the addition of 4 new positions in the city attorney's office. So a deputy community prosecutor to support the increased caseload for the department, 2 senior deputy city attorneys, as well as 1 senior legal assistant to provide additional support. In the city clerk's department, we're also requesting 1 municipal records manager to facilitate the centralization of record keeping, as well as oversight of the records division within the clerk's office. We're also requesting the addition of 2 new positions in the city manager's department in the public information office. So 1 graphic designer to assist with citywide public information materials in the Office of Communications, as well as with the city's Channel 3, and 1 multimedia officer to also oversee operations for the city's Cable 3 channel, YouTube channel, and other social media content. So adding these 2 positions will also bring in savings from contracted services, just while also allowing for a more responsive Office of Communications. There is a summary in the chart below that does show the change in cost. So as you can see, while the cost for fiscal year 23-24 in the middle column does show an increase, from the current year costs, we do actually expect that this cost will most likely be lower, as it will take some time for these 2 positions to be recruited and fully brought on board. Additionally, on the final column, there is an additional $100,000 that is planned for just expanded community outreach based on the mayor's initiatives for increased public communication and outreach. Within the Community Development Department, we're requesting 2 combination inspectors to help to mitigate backlog and provide more timely inspections, as well as 1 plan check engineer just to meet the additional demands for service in this area. So these positions will minimize reliance on consultants, and then also provide savings from contracting out these positions, which would save almost $212,000 on an annual basis. Just one thing to note is that the addition of these positions would still just kind of meet our base level of service. We're not necessarily budgeting for like the peaks and highs in planning and development, but really more at what we expect to be our recurring levels of service. So consultants would still be utilized when there are peaks in demand for development. And then in the Human Resources Department, we are requesting the addition of 1 Human Resources analyst in the Risk Management Division to also support the increased workload and to mitigate risk, and to also look at additionally managing our increased workers' compensation costs, so that hopefully we can reduce those costs more effectively. So then the next chart shows the full-time equivalents in the general fund. So as you can see, our pre-COVID levels were at 852 positions in 1920. And then with the separation incentive and restructure plan in 2021, we went down to approximately 793 positions. And then with our current staffing levels, including the 11 proposed positions, we are looking at 832 positions that would be funded through the general fund. So the next, we just have an overview of our long-term financial plan. Just one thing to note, this does include the current CalPERS expected rate of return of 5.5% for the current fiscal year. Of course, this number is subject to change. It could be higher, it could be lower. And we'll know this. We will continue to keep council updated as we learn more information from CalPERS. Just another couple of things just to note in this chart. So this does not include the impacts of any potential labor negotiations that will be upcoming in the next fiscal year. So we do have 4 union contracts. We have POA, which will be presented later this evening, as well as PMA, FMA, and HBFA. One other thing that this does not include as well in the 2022-23 numbers are also the additional revenues related to parking of $2.8 million that were approved at the last council meeting, and then the potential one-time revenues that we will be receiving in future years from the $25 million settlement that was discussed by our city attorney this evening. That said, just one thing to note is, despite these factors, we do want to just note that there is still an expected deficit beginning in fiscal year 25-26, which would potentially result in the use of Section 115 reserves at that time. So just to provide just a quick refresher on our current pension status. So in fiscal year 2021, the CalPERS return was 21.3%. And at that point, our funded level was superfunded at almost 103% versus our previous level of 77%. So then in 21-22, CalPERS did experience a negative 7.5% return, and our expected CalPERS funded status is approximately 88%. We should know the final number next month when the actual reports are released by CalPERS at that time. So just additionally, just kind of as an additional reminder, the city did also adopt an unfunded accrued liability pension policy, which mandates that we set aside additional funds to pay off any new future pension debt. So included in our proposed budget is a $2.6 million transfer into our Section 115 trust to help mitigate any future pension liabilities that we will incur. And then this is just a chart that kind of shows our potential UAL payment projection in the out years. So as you can see, we would be potentially drawing on our Section 115 trust beginning in fiscal year 25-26. And then our Section 115 trust is expected to be fully depleted by fiscal year 2030-31. And then we would have a shortfall at that time. Of course, this is assuming it's kind of a status quo budget. It doesn't include any labor impacts. So the next item for discussion is also a recommended update to our general fund reserve policy. So we are, of course, the city does desire to maintain a prudent level of reserves, just kind of based on the revenue impacts that were previously discussed, as well as our desire to maintain our current strong bond ratings to also minimize our borrowing costs in the future. So the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, recommends a minimum of 2 months of operating expenditures to be set aside for unforeseen events. So with that, staff's recommending consolidating certain general fund assignments into the Economic Uncertainties or Rainy Day Reserve Fund in order to meet this 2-month reserve requirement. So the 5 categories, the 5 assignments that we are recommending for consolidation into our rainy day fund are listed below. So there are City View Replacement, Triple Flip, Strategic Initiatives, Housing Agreement, and Year-End Fair Value. So with the consolidation of these 5 areas into our rainy day fund, then we would meet our 2-month reserve requirement and we would be fully funded at that time. So we are also recommending some additional adjustments to our general fund reserve policy as well. So we would also recommend a minimum of 25% of any unrestricted one-time revenues be transferred to the city's Section 115 trust, and also strengthening our reserve policy to ensure that funds are set aside systematically and only used when truly necessary. So then to that point, we would request that, council, that any use of the rainy day reserves would be approved by a 6/7 vote of City Council. Additionally, if economic uncertainties or rainy day funds are utilized and that level does fall below the 2-month reserve requirement, then the Chief Financial Officer would bring forward a proposed plan to City Council to replenish the fund within 3 fiscal years. So, just as a reminder, cities with robust fiscal reserve policies are more likely to receive and maintain improved bond ratings just based on higher scores related to sound fiscal management policies. And then with that, I will turn over the presentation to our city engineer, Tom Herbell, to discuss the capital improvement program.
All right, thank you, Sunny. So good evening, council, staff. To summarize, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. To summarize my presentation from the last City Council study session, the budget for next year is $41.2 million, like Sunny mentioned earlier, and it's broken down into these categories. Drainage at $1.8 million, facilities at $4 million, neighborhood at $7.4 million, parks and beaches $2.9 million, sewer at $8.3 million, streets and transportation at $11.8 million, and water at $5 million. But now I'd like to touch upon and add a little bit of context from the last presentation where I mentioned staff recommends a 12-year paving cycle. So to achieve a balanced budget, staff did review the 2 cycles, and staff recommends the 12-year cycle for the following reasons. The 9-year cycle costs an additional $2.5 million annually, which over the life of that cycle is $22.5 million. And then over the 7 years, the pavement classification index would only increase by 1 point. Remember, we're talking a scale of 1 to 100. So we're going from an 83.4 to an 84.4. And even my trained eye at the asphalt can't even tell the difference between the two. So that puts us really in a good condition with both a 12-year and a 9-year cycle. So therefore, it didn't seem fiscally prudent to implement the 9-year paving cycle, which would cost about an additional, as I mentioned, $22.5 million over the 9 years. So I just wanted to provide that context to you on staff's recommendation, and I'll turn it back over to Sunny.
Thank you, Tom. So this evening, City Council approval is requested for adoption of the proposed 23-24 budget. So the key components include the budget spending plan, as well as the transfer of the $4.9 million AES reserve into a dedicated AES CIP projects fund, the use of $3.9 million in equipment replacement reserve, and then the allocation of the one-time general fund portion of Emerald Cove settlement funds, split 50-50 between our Section 115 trust and then the general liabilities fund, as well as approval of the addition of 11 FTEs across various departments. So additionally, we are also requesting approval to revert back to the 12-year paving cycle to achieve a balanced budget, and then also approval of the updates to the general fund reserve policy and consolidation of certain general fund assignments previously mentioned into the economic uncertainties reserve, as well as approval of amendment number 2 to the professional services contract with Mind OC for the Be Well HB Mobile Crisis Response Program, and then approval of the professional services contract with the National Council for Community Development, or NDC, for technical assistance services. And that concludes my presentation, and we're available for questions.
Thank you. I would like to just open, I've talked to the city manager directly. My understanding is we're going to be in deficit budget year +2. I believe it's anticipating, I know it's not in these numbers, anticipating a POA approval. And that doesn't even count the other collective bargaining organizations we're going to be dealing with. I've asked city manager if he would be willing to go to fix that structural deficit for budget year +2 to go to the department heads, each one of the department heads, excluding public safety, and ask for whatever the modest number is, whatever the modest percentage would be. And so right now, today, we don't have that number, and so I'm not prepared to vote for the budget today or propose to vote for the budget today. But I am hopeful that we can ask the department heads, because I think the department heads know best their department and where is the most efficient way to make those modest reductions to make sure budget year +2 we're back in positive area instead of negative area.
And Mayor, just as a reminder before we get into council comments, if there are questions by council for staff, that's great, and then we have a public hearing.
Okay. Are there any other questions from staff, from members? Okay. We'll go into public hearing. Let's see where it is. I got it. Okay. Open the public hearing. City Clerk, do we have any signed up to speak on the public hearing on this item?
Yes, Mayor Strickland, we will have one person signed up, Amory Hansen. And I'd also like to announce that we did receive 2 email communications regarding the 23-24 proposed budget that were uploaded as supplemental communications into the online file.
Thank you. I need to announce this. Individuals wishing to provide a comment on an item scheduled for public hearing may do so either in person or filing a request to speak form delivered to the city clerk. All speakers are encouraged but not required to identify themselves by name. Each speaker may have up to 3 minutes unless the volume of speakers warrants reducing time allowance. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mr. Amory Hansen. I'm speaking tonight in support of item 24H, the creation of 3 new positions in the Communications Department. These 3 positions will provide additional resources as the city expands its Communications Department. Each position has its own unique role, but they are all part of the same team. Once again, I urge a yes vote on item 24H. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can close the public
Okay.
hearing. That concludes our comments.
Okay, so we'll close the
Mr.
public hearing.
Mayor,
Oh, it's
point of
okay.
order before you
Please
do that.
Please do.
If we're going to potentially continue this to the next meeting, would we want to close the public hearing? We want to leave the public hearing open so we don't have to re-notice the whole thing?
Well,
Just a question.
Very thoughtful. If there's, if we haven't, I don't know if we've gotten there yet, but if there's interest in continuing this, then yes, keeping the public hearing open so we don't have to re-notice is better.
Okay.
Just that was before,
Before
you hit the gavel. I
Thank
just
you,
wanted to-
Councilman. Again, I'm not prepared to vote for it. I'm hoping that we get that information back from our department heads and be able to get those modest reductions this year to get kind of ahead of it. So we're on a fiscal path, budget year +2.
So there's an alternative action we can choose, which is B, which is to continue the public hearing until June 20th, 2023.
Correct.
So I'd like to make that motion.
Well,
Just a couple of, I mean, there's
go
a
ahead.
motion on the floor. Go ahead.
Councilman.
Well, I just had some questions before, but if there's a motion on the floor, we'll.
Okay. Well, before I second that motion, I want to ask the city manager. We discussed maybe the 20th wasn't enough time for you to talk to your department heads, come back, and maybe we would call a special session just on the budget that last week of June. Is the 20th a good enough time, or should we talk about maybe doing a special meeting just on the budget in the last week of June?
Yeah, I think the preference would be a special meeting, Mayor, to give us ample time to be as thoughtful as possible.
Great. Great.
But the only thing is, on the continuance of the hearing, it's a date and time certain? Do we have a date and time certain?
We'd need that because we'd need to republish
Hold on.
a new hearing. Can we do it to a new date? A date certain? That'd be great.
Does it need to be on a Tuesday, or can we do any day?
Or Mayor, it could just be re-noticed and you don't have to worry about identifying the date.
I mean, technically, we could postpone it till the 20th and postpone it again from there.
Okay, we'll do. Okay, so I'll second.
I have a question too. I'm sorry.
I'll second the council member's motion, and then Councilwoman, you have a question?
So, and I appreciate that you had asked the city manager to look for potential, and with the department heads to look for potential cuts. But, you know, with any budget where it's both, you know, in and out. So I'm just curious if we could also discuss additional revenue options as well. So we consider both sides of that equation.
Absolutely. There's the revenues and efficiencies that we will look at as a complete department team. Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. I guess this is for finance. If we continue this item and hypothetically speaking, the next item is approved, were we working off of the new contract for POA built into the budget at that point as real numbers?
Yes, we would.
Okay, so that this one of your slides will get updated for the next meeting then?
It will be updated, yes.
And so you're looking at how many budget years out to balance the
I
budget
believe
projected?
talking to our chief financial officer as well as the city manager in our meetings, I'm looking at budget year +2.
So fiscal year 25, 26?
I believe that was the case.
I just want to make sure that I understand what
I believe
plus-
that was
plus
the
two
case.
means.
I think that's a point of clarification we'll come back with. I think in the brief conversation I had with Sunny, we were looking at 24, 25, but we can bring back our best shot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. That's all I had right now.
Okay. Any other questions? There's been a motion and a second to move it to the 20th.
20th with public hearing open, correct?
Yep, correct.
All right. Call the roll. Councilmember Kalmick.
Aye.
Mosher.
Aye.
Vandermark.
Yes.
Strickland.
Aye.
McKeon.
Yes.
Bolton.
Aye.
Burns.
Thank you. Members, we're now on file item number 25. Staff, please introduce your report.
Tom, do you have the clicker?
No, Tom was,
Oh.
he didn't have
Oops, that didn't go up. Thank you, Sonny. Thank you, Mayor and Honorable Mayor and City Council members. The item we're on right now is the introduction of the proposed Memorandum of Understanding with the Police Officers Association. This was agendized tonight for your consideration pursuant to the Myers-Millis-Brown Act, or the MMBA. This act requires the city to meet and confer in good faith with labor groups and associations. Staff, along with Peter Brown, the City Council appointed chief negotiator, started the discussion on the proposed agreement last October. This was started in anticipation of the sunset of the current agreement, which is June 30th of 2023. Since last October, city staff has met multiple times with POA on the discussions of the proposals and reached tentative agreement in May of this year. While the city is not obligated to accept the proposal of the labor agreement, the city does need to formally consider the negotiated pact. Oops, and I'm not moving. There we go. The proposed Memorandum of Understanding with the Police Officers Association includes the following terms. The new MOU has a 3-year term of agreement starting at the end of this month, June 2023, and runs through the end of the fiscal year, June 2025-26, or the end of the fiscal year, which is June 2026. Each of the there's a 5% wage increase each of the 3 years of the contract. The agreement includes special pay increases for programs including increases to advanced post certificate, special assignment pay specifically for chief pilot. There's an adjust to longevity for sworn employees up to 15%, and there's a longevity and retention pay for non-sworn employees. The general leave accrual is adjusted to include continuous service in law enforcement agencies, and the MOU provides an increase to city contribution to health benefits in January of 2024 and January of 2025. Additionally, there's a continued contribution from the city to the Retiree Medical Trust, and there's clarifying language for work schedules, which includes motor officers, communications center, patrol division, and jail employees. The proposed MOU provides language changes for uniforms, assignments, job sharing, and updates the alternative dispute resolution. The updated pay schedules are included in the proposed MOU as discussed earlier. And the language also modifies general leave, Family Medical Leave Act items, provides increased association business bank time, and changes to the voluntary catastrophic leave program. The fiscal impact for the agreement is provided on the chart you see here for each fiscal year. For fiscal year 23-24, it's $4.6 million. For fiscal year 24-25, it is $2.9 million. Fiscal year 25-26 is $3 million, and fiscal year 26-27 is $1.5 million, for a total of overall contract of $12 million. So tonight, the City Council, with the item that was presented to Council tonight, the RCA includes a summary of modifications that has been available to the public since last week, fiscal impact report, and red line versions of the MOU. And tonight, the POA Memorandum of Understanding is here for your consideration to approve for introduction. If the council approves it for introduction tonight, then it will be agendized for the next City Council meeting for consideration of adoption. It is required to have two meetings per our COIN ordinance. And the City Council may provide alternate direction as you see fit. I would like to take a little bit of time to thank Peter Brown, our Chief Negotiating Officer, and members of the City of Huntington Beach team, Sunny Han, our Acting Financial Officer, Police Chief Para, Teresa St. Peter, our Interim Human Resources Director, Jose Rodriguez, our Acting Deputy Director of HR, Patricia Albers, our Principal Human Resource Analyst, of course, our City Manager helping us work through this process, and we're available for any questions you may have.
Well, let me open by saying I also thank everybody involved and the whole staff, all the hard work it took to get us to this point. I believe the most essential role of government is public safety. Speaking for myself, I want to thank Chief Para for his leadership. He's done a remarkable job as our police chief. My goal in this whole negotiation was to give him the tools he needs to make sure that we stop the police officers here in Huntington Beach from leaving our department and going to other places, and have the goal of getting those lateral moves back to Huntington Beach. And that will allow Chief Para to be able to give him the tools to make sure our citizens, our businesses, and our children are safe. So with that, I would like to move to approve the introduction of the proposed MOU, or understanding with the POA.
I'll second.
Is there any other? Okay, well, it's been moved. Oh, no. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
An observation for context. So I don't know if people are aware of the recruiting situation. So this is not unique to Huntington Beach. This is something that police departments are experiencing nationwide, but it's increasingly difficult to recruit folks the supply of people who are qualified to be police officers is a lot smaller than it was, certainly smaller than it was 30 years ago. My husband will be really upset if I say it was 30 years ago when he started in law enforcement, but you know, it's a different world, and so we have to be really competitive in order to get the best people, and that's what we want. We want the best people for our PD. So just wanted to provide that bit of context for folks. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Chief. How many positions do we currently have open outside of folks on disability?
Roughly 27.
27 open positions. So we got a lot of our officers are working extra shifts to fill that. We don't just leave shifts open as best we can, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this contract makes us competitive, and you know, it's the reality that we live in Orange County, and it's Huntington Beach is a great place to work, but that alone isn't enough to bring our folks over. I think that this makes us competitive for laterals coming from other departments. It helps, I think, keep some of our folks here a little bit longer, so we have some institutional knowledge and potentially, you know, stop some of those folks from retiring, sticking on a little bit longer. So that we've got again some institutional knowledge. So I think it's got it has three legs to this this stool to really help recruit and retain officers. It also obviously puts folks through incentivizes folks to come through the academy as well. So we can take people through the Huntington Beach way from start to finish. And it is a lot of money. But again, we've got folks leaving our city to go to other cities, and this is what's going to be required to remain competitive. This is going to put some strain on our budget, and we're really going to need to look at revenue raising because a lot of other departments are quite thin already, and to have this built on their backs, I think is unfair. So I hope this council is interested in finding additional sources of revenue. Because some of the other projects we want to do, like the one-stop shop, aren't going to have any bodies in there to staff it. So this will be really important, I think, in one of the big legs of what government does, which is provide public safety. And I don't think gets too aggressive in any other stance, but really does the meat and potatoes of just patrol work, which we struggle to meet on a daily basis. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
I just, a point of a personal privilege, I would like to just announce, when you mention revenue raising, there's a difference between what we're talking about. I just want to make it clear from where my standpoint is. I will not vote for a sales tax increase at any point in time. I want to make that clear. I don't want to put a misnomer out there to the public that because we're going forward on this, that somehow we're locked into quote unquote, a lot of people talk about revenue raising. I just want to make that clear. If anybody here thought that that's where I was going to be, that's not going to be where I am.
I just want to, as a reminder, that we don't want to go off onto other topics not agendized.
Understand.
So just
okay. Thank you.
Just want to say I never mentioned sales tax publicly. So.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded. Please, clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Kelmick.
Aye.
Mosher.
Aye.
Vandermark.
Yes.
Strickland.
Aye.
McKeon.
Yes.
Bolton.
Aye.
Burns.
Aye.
The item passes 7-0.
Thank you. Members, we're now moving on to file item number 26, submitted by Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Burns, would you like to introduce this item?
Sure. The proposal for the charter amendments that were placed on the November 2022 ballot by the previous city council failed. There are some areas in the charter that could use some meaningful updates. The California primary is set for March 5th, 2024. We should have a city council ad hoc committee assembled to return to the entire city council with recommendations for some charter updates. I am requesting that the mayor, Tony Strickland, to lead an ad hoc committee of himself and 2 other city council members of his choice to work with the city attorney's office if necessary, and to return to the city council at a regular city council meeting in July of this year with recommendations for the proposed charter amendments. It is also requested that the city clerk, who is our local elections official, provide a timeline of events or deadlines the city is required to meet in order to get any proposed city charter amendments on the ballot for the March 5th, 2024 election.
I'll second that motion. Discussion? Go ahead.
This may be a question for the staff. So is there a cost associated with doing the charter review?
I think I would defer to the city clerk. I think, was there a cost for the election?
I have cost estimates to place an item on the ballot, but not for, review time and things like that.
Yeah, we haven't produced a cost for staff time to do that, but we could do that for the council.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is because in the process that was just last year, there was a facilitator who helped the Charter Review Commission work through reams and reams of suggestions and things like that. And so I'm anticipating that there was a cost associated with having that person help the city out on this, because it's a heavy lift. So just without knowing what the cost is, I'm not going to be able to support it. I'd like to know what the cost is first.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Councilman.
I think to dovetail onto Councilmember Bolton's comments, we just went through this last year. Obviously, some didn't pass, and I believe some folks on this dais ran against some of them. So without enough meat on this to really kind of identify what direction this charter commission would be going, or charter committee, ad hoc committee would be going, I can't support it. In addition, the fact that it's an ad hoc committee would be meeting behind closed doors, not understanding. I think a lot of the benefit of the Charter Review Commission was that it was a public meeting. All the ideas were presented publicly, understanding how and why the conclusions were reached, as opposed to a closed door meeting public wouldn't be allowed into. And then it outspits out of a black box charter recommendations, I think, does a disservice to the community in understanding the reasoning for those, instead of just having to read the 200 words on the ballot statement. So if we're going to amend our charter, I think it should be an open and rigorous process. That ad hoc committee, if it meets, should be a public meeting, publicly noticed with public comments at it, so that the residents can comment, as opposed to bringing back just charter amendments that have already been kind of set up and ready to go for an up or down vote from this dais.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Really, I'll just concur with Councilmember Kalmick's comments. I appreciate all of the efforts that were made by city staff, the facilitator, and all of the individuals that were on the previous Charter Review Commission. Everything was done publicly over a very long period of time. It was a very arduous process. Councilmember McKeon was on that as well. I think that it was really an example of transparency and good government to have that be available to everyone. Again, as was mentioned, in the previous campaign, there was much talk about a lot of closed door meetings and lack of transparency. And again, this particular effort in the past was, I think, a very representative of good transparency and good government. And it had, as one of the public commenters mentioned earlier, a diverse representation of the community, given that council members were able to select individuals to be able to review the charter as it is. I think that having this as an ad hoc committee really goes against that. It's very important that if we are going to have charter amendments recommended, that there is more transparency, that there is daylight on this, and for those reasons, I will not be recommending or supporting this.
To retort, I would just say anything that comes out of the ad hoc committee would have to come to the city council, and the community would be able to voice their opinion like they do on any other item that we vote for here in the city council. And they have to be voted on in an affirmative way by the people of Huntington Beach. So that would be my retort. But the clerk, it's been moved, it's been seconded. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kalmick?
No.
Mosier?
No.
Vandermark?
Yes.
Strickland?
Aye.
McKeon?
Yes.
Bolton?
No.
Burns?
Aye.
The item passes 4-3 with council members Kalmick, Mosher, and Bolton voting no.
Okay, members, we're now on to file item number 27. Councilmember McKeon, would you like to introduce your item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So the state continues to recklessly enact legislation that purportedly requires the city to plan for and build housing that could exceed the city's planned housing growth, as detailed in the city's general plan. And the environmental impacts analyzed as part of the Environmental Impact Report, EIR, for the Beach-Edinger Corridor Specific Plan back in 2010 were consistent with the city's general plan. The environmental impacts back then were analyzed and provided to the public long before the recent aggressive state housing laws that now purportedly require a massive increase in the amount of housing in the city. While the city is actively challenging these recent state high-density housing mandates because of the rash of new state housing laws, the informational value of the data provided as part of the Beach-Edinger Corridor Specific Plans EIR is lost and the document obsolete. Because of this, I recommend the city attorney and the city manager return to the city council with a plan for decertification of the Beach-Edinger Corridor Specific Plan EIR and vacate all associated findings. I don't believe there should be a set date on that, perhaps maybe in the fall, but I still recommend that the city attorney and city manager return to council with a plan for decertification of the Beach-Edinger Corridor Specific Plan EIR and vacate all associated findings.
Okay. Councilman Burns. Oh, second the motion. Any other discussion? Councilwoman, I'm sorry. Councilwoman, go. It's your birthday, go.
Okay, so I want to understand kind of like what we're trying to solve for, because I don't understand why we would decertify an EIR that's been in place that has projects built under it. I think there are probably projects that are being contemplated that would need to take advantage of the fact that we already have this in place. So just saying it's obsolete, yeah, can you elaborate?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So again, it's been 13 years since this EIR was drafted. It's stale, and we shouldn't be relying on it. It's obsolete because the state has passed all of these new housing laws that were not contemplated in the existing EIR from 2010. The landscape has totally changed, and the state has turned everything on its head. The 2010 EIR did not take into account the new housing laws passed by the state that will drastically grow the housing stock and our population. And now that the state has passed these new housing laws, we don't know what the landscape will look like in 10 years. The existing EIR relies on old data and projections based on the old laws. Essentially, if the state left zoning alone, we could maybe rely on a 13-year-old EIR, but the 2010 EIR does not take into account increased public safety needs, infrastructure needs, our finite resources, et cetera. And so this is how disruptive and destructive these housing mandates are to our landscape and our carefully crafted general plan, which connects every zoned area of our city, and their effects ripple throughout every corner of our city's general plan, and in my opinion, render the 2010 EIR obsolete and irrelevant. And the way I look at it is I know we all care about the environment, so I feel like everyone should be happy, and that's what SEEK was there for, is so that the public knows about the negative environmental impacts of projects, and every single project should stand on its own. In my business, every project I bring forward has to go through a CEQA review. It has to take into the negative impacts to the environment on these projects. I feel the 2010 EIR is stale, it's obsolete, it's not relevant anymore, so it should be looked at and it should be vacated, in my opinion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman, go ahead.
So when I saw this, my first question was why, right? And your comments to Councilmember Mosher, I don't think I answered that question. What are you trying to solve for?
This is obsolete. This is 13 years old.
But that's not a solve. What are you trying to affect with that by decertifying the
Every
EIR?
project should stand on its own.
So
every project should go through a CEQA environmental review.
So
every project that I do in my business goes through a CEQA environmental review. Why would you have a programmatic EIR from 13 years ago that's obsolete?
So programmatic EIRs contemplate a larger program, in this case, a specific plan. Each project that's gone through the Beach-Edinger Corridor specific plan has to do an environmental checklist to see if it exceeds potentially the ramifications or impacts set forth in the EIR. How many units did the Beach-Edinger Corridor specific plan EIR contemplate?
I don't know the answer, but
6,400.
Okay.
So it was certified with 4,500 with a statement of overriding consideration. Council at the time dropped that number down and exchanged it for commercial property.
Sure.
6,400 units were contemplated originally, and the environmental impacts and mitigation measures are all part of that, right? First of all, backing up, there's no mechanism to decertify an established EIR. I've talked to a bunch of land use attorneys, and there's nothing in CEQA that creates that mechanism. So sure, we'll let staff go try to figure that out. In the meantime, do you know, the majority in the last 6 years of projects built on Beach Boulevard are commercial projects, and they tier under that. So by repealing this in some mechanism, you're being anti-business. You've got the daycare my child goes to used that EIR. Any auto dealer that wants to remodel is not going to be able to tier under this EIR. In fact, as I think the BIA said, they're going to use other remedies, including SB 35 and AB 2011, to build housing. It has the exact opposite impact. So I don't understand. If the goal is to not build any housing or make it more difficult to build housing on Beach Boulevard, go ahead and file to rezone Beach Boulevard back to commercial, and you'll see what it looks like 30 years ago. We had it zoned commercial for 30 years. If the goal is to eliminate residential, and that's the question that both Councilmember Bolton and I were getting to, is why? Is the why to not build housing on Beach Boulevard, which is a public policy goal, right? That's something that people can follow, and there are ways to do that. Say it. Say it, we don't want to build housing on Beach Boulevard, and change the zoning to eliminate housing on Beach Boulevard. Because then that allows staff to build public policy around that goal. If the goal is to decertify the EIR to put us in this nebulous area where only judges have historically been able to decertify EIRs well before projects have actually started, there's no way to get us here. You end up in this weird way where you're trying to establish how any of these things work, and then what happens, because state law requires you to have a valid environmental document in order to do a specific plan. So anybody coming through to try to build a project or remodel their store on Beach Boulevard, the G&M's been under construction forever, is the zoning still valid if that happens? Because the specific plans require an EIR, a certified environmental document. It doesn't achieve your goal of each project having to do an environmental document on their own. The commercial projects will all have to spend more money, which my belief is that government should do the stuff that we can help make businesses more successful, and doing programmatic EIRs solve that problem. This sets a weird precedent that anybody can, what are we going to go after the downtown specific plan EIR? Because that's 25 years old now. Are we going to go after the Edwards Hill specific plan, the Bellaterra specific plan? This doesn't make any sense. This is not a serious policy goal, and you guys aren't serious people.
This is serious. I have full faith in our staff, our city manager, our city attorney, to come back with a plan. If they come back with a recommendation to repeal the entire Beach-Edinger corridor specific plan, I welcome that as well. So I will entertain any plan comes back, because the Beach-Edinger corridor specific plan has been so problematic for such a long period of time. Again, in my business, all these commercial projects you've mentioned, like we build gas stations in California, across the country. We've never had to do an EIR. We have to go through CEQA, right, and make sure and analyze the negative impacts of the environment. But just because you remove the EIR doesn't mean that every project's gonna have to go through and do an EIR. Okay, so, but again, if the recommendation comes back to repeal the entire Beach-Edinger corridor specific plan, I recommend that as well. But this is an H item. It's an idea to direct staff to come back with no set date.
It's not an idea. You are directing staff to return with a plan to decertify an EIR.
And if that plan comes back and they go, it's too nebulous, it's too complicated to do this, we recommend you repeal the entire Beach-Edinger corridor.
Which will require an environmental document to be recertified in order to do that.
If that's the plan and we all vote, we get to analyze and the public analyzes it, and we feel that's the best course forward, then we'll do that.
Multiple millions of dollars spent to go back to a commercial zoning.
So this should never sunset ever. This EIR should just go on forever.
No.
Okay.
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, you guys, I know you care a lot about the environment, so why? I would think you would be happy about this.
So by repealing this, right, you lose all the mitigation measures for all of the intersections and all the transit.
So there should never be a sunset on this.
CEQA doesn't contemplate a sunset on environmental documents.
13 years old.
Sure.
The landscape has changed.
Sure, but each project has to do an environmental checklist to see if it meets or exceeds those thresholds, right? We did the general plan EIR. All of this tiers off of other things. This is a gross misunderstanding of how CEQA works. It is a policy document to understand environmental impacts, right? It sets goals and thresholds that we can estimate now based on what were set 13 years ago. But the projects that haven't come through, right? How much housing's been built on Beach Boulevard in the last 8 years? None?
Again,
None. None.
It's been 13 years. I don't understand the concern.
So it's anti-business. Like, we are for business in this community. You guys, one of your tenets is to roll out the red carpet for business. This makes it harder to do that. If you decertify the Beach-Edinger Quarter Specific Plan, we're gonna have to do an EIR, which we're gonna have to recertify, which is gonna spend a whole bunch of money to go back to commercial zoning, which would eliminate all residential zoning on Beach Boulevard, right? All mixed-use zoning, and we go back to commercial. You can't just repeal the specific plan. You'd have to do a full zoning text amendment. You can't just revert. We could go find the old code from years ago and re-implement that.
Again, if that's the plan that staff comes back with, and we all debate it.
But that's not the policy direction. Your policy direction is to decertify the EIR. Is your policy direction to eliminate residential zoning on Beach Boulevard?
Look,
because that's your inference you just made.
My policy direction, as it's stated in the agenda, so whatever plan staff comes back with, if they have other recommendations that are...
That's not what you're directing them to do.
I just said, direct the city attorney and city manager to return to city council the plan for decertification of the Beach-Edinger Quarter Specific Plan, EIR, and vacate all associated findings. Now, if they come back with a plan, it's a little bit different, and we debate it up here on the dais. And
that's not what the staff... Your staff direction is to do the environmental decertification.
Sure.
But you just said earlier that you have no problem rolling back the Beach-Edinger Quarter Specific Plan.
If they come back, if that is their recommendation, I would support it.
I will say, I let this go for a little while. Look, finish your comments, and then you could retort. But okay, Councilwoman.
Thank you. I also wanted to quadruple check what the intent was, because from what I'm understanding, it is a housing issue, and you are specifically asking staff to decertify the EIR. But what you're talking about now is if they were to come back with a different recommendation, you're asking them to specifically come back with a recommendation of how they're going to go about decertifying the EIR, which, as has been mentioned, has never been done before, except for by a judge prior to a project being created. So again, if the intent is that the policy is to stop housing development on the Beach-Edinger corridor, that is one thing, and then the staff could come back with various solutions to that. And that is a policy direction, one which I would not support, but one which you could provide. I would like to say that I do think that there would be a massive impact to business. And again, you all campaigned on rolling out the red carpet. I think this will be rolling it right back. It's a slap in the face to commercial development in that space. You talked about this being recklessly implemented. And I think that this, in the way that it's done, is also being recklessly implemented because it's not considering the ramifications. And with that, I wanted to ask Ms. Luna Reynosa, what are the potential impacts in your perspective to the decertification if it could even happen?
Well, while I'm pondering that question, I would first like to clarify that an EIR is not a policy document, it is a disclosure document. So it is a document that discloses potential environmental impacts due to a project. So just to make sure we're all clear on that. Also, that the EIR has a threshold of significance. So this idea that it's like obsolete or stale, I mean, until it reaches that threshold, it analyzed and disclosed the environmental impacts of development up into that particular threshold. It was accurate that the number analyzed was 6,500. The findings of fact and statement were a lesser number, but the reality is that only 1,900 units have been either constructed or permitted. So there's still significant room in the existing EIR. Potential impacts, I will definitely defer to the city attorney's office related to any legal impacts. I am not aware of a particular process. I looked at the CEQA guidelines. I looked at Curtin's planning and law book regarding decertifying EIRs. I didn't find anything there. But if you could do it, so I think that was the hypothetical question, it would currently, in the past 5 years since I've been here, there's only been one residential project approved under Beach-Edinger corridor specific plan, and that was actually the Ellis Condos project, which was litigated. Other than that, it has been all commercial projects, CVS, learning experience, preschool, new auto dealer, other auto dealer improvements, Newman Medical Building, Beach Pet Hospital, Hong Medical Campus, expansion, a car wash, a gas station, a 7-Eleven, is kind of a list to give you of commercial projects that have been approved that were able to tier off of that existing EIR. So if it didn't exist, they would do their own. Staff would look at the project description. We would go through a CEQA checklist to see what potential environmental impacts existed, and depending on that, whether they're significant, whether they can be mitigated, would determine the type of environmental document, which could be an exemption if there's one that exists. It could be a negative declaration, it could be a mitigated negative declaration, or an EIR.
Just like every commercial real estate project I've ever worked on has to go through the same process. So again, I don't feel it's stifling growth. Every developer of commercial, especially retail, knows that they have to go through CEQA. I've gone back. I thought people would be happy about this. You know, we care about the environment. Just because the specific plan is in a certain area, these 13,368 units and all these state like housing laws have changed the entire city. The entire city's general plan is connected. So I think it's old, I think it's stale, I think it's obsolete, and I'll make my motion again to direct the city attorney and city manager to return to city council the plan for decertification of the Beach-Edinger corridor specific plan EIR and vacate all associated findings.
It's been moved and seconded.
I wasn't done speaking though either.
I'm sorry. I
That's
thought you
okay.
were. Go ahead.
That's okay, thank you. So as one of the public commenters mentioned with AB 2011, potentially that's going to impact what's going to be able to be built on current commercial properties as well with regards to housing. If we did not have a certified programmatic EIR, it was already mentioned we would potentially lose mitigation measures. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, with the EIR, a mitigation monitoring program was approved, and we have pulled those into the Beach-Edinger corridor specific plan review process so that projects are required to comply with those mitigation measures. So if a project is exempt from CEQA, that means it's exempt, that we don't have, we don't have to do CEQA on it. So there's no way to extract those mitigation measures from those projects. And further, the sort of benefit of looking at the cumulative impacts through the environmental impact report, it considered development throughout the entire corridor, both corridors, Edinger and Beach. As a result, there are a number of intersections that were identified that needed improvements to it. Any individual project that would get analyzed on its own wouldn't reach the significance threshold to require those intersections to be improved. It's just through the cumulative impacts. So we'd lose some of those types of mitigations as well as others.
And those essentially are mitigating community concerns, like the potential challenges of the
Traffic,
intersection.
noise, shadow studies, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
So Mayor, I had another question from Ms. Lunarino. So it's my understanding then that if each project is going to have to go through a complete study, that could be more time consuming and more costly than what they would do if the programmatic EIR was still in place.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay, so we got, I don't know if everybody had a chance to see it, but we got a letter from the auto dealers today expressing concern about this, and I'm not going to be able to support it because I don't get the sense that it's been discussed with them. And I mean, they account for a significant proportion of the tax revenue that we get in the city. So if they're worried, I'm worried, and I mean, something that's going to result in businesses, it takes longer to get their project through. I don't understand the logic of that, so I'm not going to be able to support it.
Are we done? Okay, go ahead, Councilwoman.
Well, just for clarity, we're only voting to have the staff go out and bring back a plan. We're not voting on decertifying anything at the moment right now.
Correct.
And on that, go
Then
ahead.
the language should say direct the staff to study it, rather than direct the staff to come back with a plan to decertify. That's just a suggestion.
I like the way it reads, yeah.
All right. Well,
Mayor, may I have?
go ahead.
In this period of preparing a plan, if the city attorney and I have clarifying questions, may we come back to the council and
Please.
and ask?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I have, I was just going to add, I have some of the concerns. I too got the letter from the car dealers and I haven't sat down with them. But the way I look at this is it's a opening idea, suggestion, and talk to staff. Staff will come back. If I feel uncomfortable with, after talking to the city manager, city attorney, and staff with the proposal as it comes back, then at that point, I would vote no. But at this point, I'll support my colleague to move this forward and see what comes back from staff. So it's been moved, it's been seconded. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kalmick.
No.
Mosier,
No.
Vandermark,
Yes.
Strickland,
Aye.
McKeon,
Yes.
Bolton,
No.
Burns.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-3. Councilmembers
Thank you.
Kalmick, Mosier, and Bolton voting no.
Thank you. Members, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. A special meeting of the Huntington Beach City Council will be held at 9 a.m. in room C and D of the Huntington Beach Central Library at 7111 Golden West Street, Huntington Beach, California, on Thursday, June 8th, 2023. The next regular scheduled meeting of the Huntington Beach City Council Public Finance Authority is Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. We are adjourned.